Record. So,
Great.
Guy, thank you for, well, I was going to say for volunteering to do this session. I'm not sure it was, we thought it would be a great idea and you'd be great to do it. So thank you for agreeing to do this. So please tell us a bit more about the experience in Birmingham.
Wonderful. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Just to introduce myself. So I have this role in Birmingham, encouraging discipleship essentially is my main job. But as part of that, I'm overseeing the urban network, which I inherited. And I also live in an estate context in East Birmingham, just down the road from Al Barrett, actually. So there you go, where my wife Ruth is a vicar of 3 churches in urban areas, which is an interesting thing to observe. Just the challenges of 3 as opposed to 1. I've got some slides, so am I able to share those? I just thought it's good to have something to hang on.
Yeah, have you got the share screen facility?
Yeah, it should work. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, so I just thought can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
I'm going to outline what our urban network is, who it's for, because I think that's quite an interesting question, what our annual program is, and how we go about planning and communicating. And then we'll have a couple of minutes if anyone wants to ask anything. So as I say, I inherited an already established network, which had been through various permutations. And I guess when you inherit something, you need to revisit the purpose. And so we went through a process with the clergy and lay ministers who were involved, actually articulating what we wanted the network to be for. And this is how we've expressed it. It's for sharing honesty between friends. So there's something about creating a space where people can be themselves, reflecting together on what God is saying in key areas, developing new imagination for mission and ministry in outer estates and inner urban contexts. And again, that's quite interesting because previously there had been 2 separate networks. If you're aware of Birmingham, you'll know that the vast majority of the diocese is urban estate based, and there had been an inner estate and an inner urban network and an outer estates network. Before I arrived, those 2 had been conjoined. And so there's something in the program about reflecting those 2 priorities. It's about sharing resources and being spiritually refreshed and encouraged. So there's something about just the simple solidarity and encouragement of people in what can be challenging contexts. We had some discussion about who it's for, because if you want, if you like, a safe space for practitioners where things can be honestly shared and challenges can be aired, then while you want a network that might have quite a wide reach, it's also got to have quite a defined parameters. And so we articulated that as it being a network for those with meaningful leadership in urban areas. And we were thinking of people who are on the front line, if you like. So it's not just for ordained, but neither is it just for anyone who leads anything in an urban context. It's for ordained folk and for lay people. Don't like that phrase myself, but anyway, for folk who've got what you could call frontline leadership roles in urban areas. So there's a little bit of a grey area, but by and large, that has defined our networks well. In terms of our program, we've landed on meeting 6 times a year, and we meet on different days of the week because people have different days off and different commitments. So if we vary the days of the week on which we meet, then that's helpful. We try and have 1 inner estates context visit. So last week, actually, we all went to St. Michael's Handsworth with a relatively new priest there called Father Dominic Melville. And the visit is simply about going along to be in a place, hear the story of that place, hear the challenges of that place, pray for the leader particularly and the team, ask questions, learn good practice, and then share lunch together. And actually, there's something about a group of people going to a local context that is a great blessing, actually. And just that sense of solidarity and encouragement and being together. And then we try and then also have an outer estates context visit. So that's trying to hold, whereas before there were two networks, an inner one and an outer one, now we just express while there's a lot of overlap, obviously, between the experience of being in those contexts, there are some things that are slightly distinct. So we try and express that difference in the variety of the programme. We have a retreat morning once a year with the bishop. So it's been Bishop Anne who was line managing me, and we went to her house, and I gave some input one year. She did it another year, and then we have a lunch at her house. And again, there's something about creating places of safety and space, and putting God right at the heart of our meetings in terms of paying attention to what he's saying to us. That's key. We also have once a year an overnight retreat, and we go to a retreat centre. We start at 4 o'clock on the afternoon. We have a session in the evening, a meal, wine provided, and then sessions in the morning, lunch, and finish with a communion service. The key thing about that, though, is it's subsidised. And I think that makes it possible to feel like you can open it to the whole network. If everyone was having to pay £100, I think it would be too big an ask, really. So it says something about prioritizing people that we can offer that. So, you know, if you're making bids, I think that might be a good thing to include in a bid, for example. We had Bishop with us last time, which was great. And then prior to that, we had someone called John Swales, who runs a church called Lighthouse in Leeds, based at St. George's Church. He was good as well. And this coming September, Al Barrett's coming to do that with us. So that's really valued. We have a summer social, which is simply no agenda apart from being together. And then we have one Zoom meeting a year now with a visiting speaker, and we make that topic based. Generally speaking, we've moved from a Zoom-based approach to an in-person approach over the last couple of years. And then in terms of how it's organised, I used to do it on my own, and I've now got a planning team of 3 other people from inner and outer estates contexts. And we simply, the rhythm of our meetings together is well established, these 6 meetings a year. So as a planning team, we meet twice a year on Zoom and in an ad hoc way if we need to. And then in terms of communication, I have a MailChimp database, and I send out emails to let people know, to remind people of the meetings, etc. And I've got about 130 people on that database. And I review it periodically to ensure that it's up to date, just by looking through the database of the diocesan list of who's in ministry. So that's basically how it works, and really happy to take any comments or questions that are helpful.
So anybody want to go first? Sally Ann.
Hiya. I wonder whether you had any advice on the sort of balance between it becoming a sort of a moaning shop and sharing good stories. I think for us, we've been doing it for the last sort of 6-8 months periodically. Some we've done it all on Zoom, so what you've said is really helpful. Sometimes it's been very positive, but then depending on who comes, it can turn quite negative quite quickly. It's getting that balance between allowing people to offload in a safe space, but also not letting it, kind of go too negative. I just wondered if you had any advice on that.
Thanks, Sally Ann. I mean, yeah, we do. The most negative experience in this network meeting for me has been on a Zoom meeting. So when we're in person, I find that culture, if you like, or that atmosphere is diminished. And maybe there's something about having a deliberate focus to the meetings that helps with that. So, the context meetings is very much about listening and being a blessing and being blessed by the experience of the people that we're going to see. And obviously, the encouragement there is that it's honest. And we wrestle with stuff. But there's something about being in that together and then spending time in prayer around it. And I think as well, if you frame meetings in the context of worship and prayer, I mean, sorry to teach everyone to suck eggs on this, but there's something about, lifting our eyes off ourselves and putting them on the Lord as the context for what we do that I found really, really does shift the emphasis there. And I suppose I wonder as well whether having the retreat gives enough space for that necessary melancholy and lament to arise, but then actually that we can move from that into a better place together. So those just ideas off the top of my head.
That's really useful, thank you.
Good. Anybody else? I'm struggling to see. Oh, Dave. There we go.
And I'm just wondering, Guy, in terms of that negative, is there also folk have a route, because people want to get things off their chest? There will be some practical things that are challenges to their ministry. Is there a route where they can be heard separate to the kind of groups, so that that's not necessarily the focus of your meetings?
Thanks. Well, actually, yeah. Now you've asked that. I mean, the last time it happened, someone just was offloading about basically feeling isolated, alone, abandoned, etc. And so my immediate response was to thank them for their honesty and to offer a one-to-one if they wanted to outside of that. So I think maybe there's someone with the acknowledged responsibility for follow-up. But also I think having a planning team really helps, because the pastoral wisdom that you need to be able to support people well is better held by a few rather than one. So that's been helpful as well.
Guy, you haven't said this, but I suspect that you eating together will help with that as well. There's something about eating together that lets people settle into the space and feel safe, and then you can start strong after lunch with whatever it is you're starting with. Whereas sometimes if people are coming from really hard situations and then you try and start strong straight away, it's just too much of a jar for them from what they're carrying. So I noticed that in what you said as well.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure that it's creating relational space between people that food does so well, doesn't it? And I think that's really important. Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Sam's got a hand up.
Okay, Sam.
Yeah. I thought that was a wonderful idea about actually having 2 visits where everyone can go into a context. Just 2 questions really. How you talked about people sharing good practice. How did you sell it so that people were willing to say, oh yeah, come to my context? Because some people might sort of feel like, oh gosh, I don't know if I necessarily want people might not be impressed with my, what I mean? People often have a fear around, or what people are going to think of what we're doing here. So you want to have that sense of sharing good practice. You also want to have that sense of honesty about the challenges. So how did you present it in such a way that people were willing to say, oh yeah, you can come to me? And you talked about having a lunch. Was that something which the person who was offering hospitality in the church had to provide, or did people bring their own lunch? Because that again can be a stress, particularly on low-income parishes. Oh my goodness, I've got to provide a lunch and provide people that can get and make it. And so I'm just interested in the practicalities.
Thank you. Yeah, lunch. People have provided that. I've given them the option not to. I've offered them funding for it. They haven't taken it. In practice, I think they found it very affirming to be able to offer that hospitality, actually, rather than a big pressure. How did I sell it? Obviously, oodles of charm. No. just I think if you frame it as we simply want to be with you and to learn with you and to hear your struggles as well as your joys, because we're all in this together, I think that kind of opens the door, really. You know, it's not a kind of come and give us your 5 top tips for a successful estates evangelist. You know, that's not what we're asking. It's simply about being together. And I think there's a culture that you create in the way that you frame what the network is for that probably enables those conversations to happen.
Thank you.
So anybody, just shout up if you've got a question, because I'm struggling to see.
Andrew's got his hand up.
Andrew.
Have you got any sort of advice or experience across working across different traditions within that network, and what's your experience around that?
Thank you. So yes, the last context visit we did was to inner city Handsworth, a very Anglo-Catholic parish, and a relatively new priest who was fantastic. And prior to that, we'd been to an outer estates church plant of a very evangelical flavour. To be honest, what I experienced was you couldn't put a lot of difference between them in the questions they raised, the things they were learning, the things they desired. You know, a lot of tradition seems to me more about style than content. That might just be my perspective, but in practice, I think there's something about being in frontline context that makes those kind of differences feel relatively unimportant. And again, it's the relationship between people that makes all the difference rather than the traditions. People are very good at valuing the integrity of the tradition of the places we've been to and seeing the gift that of a particular kind of spirituality or churchmanship can bring. So that's been my experience so far, really.
Anybody else? No, I think we're done. So I'm going to.
Yeah, can I just chip in with what I found in my groups that has helped is having national news, because obviously it's quite new to us in Derby, and I think some of my colleagues, I'm fairly new to it, but some of my colleagues have felt very on their own for a very long time, and they go to chapters where I go to chapter where I'm the only estates parish or not many of us there, and they talk a foreign language to me when they're talking about resources and what they're doing and numbers. And so having people together and to be able to say this is how nationally the church are moving. And so every time we get really good information from Dave, it's been a really good look, this is happening and that's happening and this is the focus and this is going on all around the country. And I just more and more of that, please, because I think it's really helping to encourage folks.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. And that reminds me that when I do my mailings, if there is stuff that's come through, I put that on the mailing. But I think also the annual Zoom with the speaker slot becomes a place for a focus on a national kind of emphasis. So the coming home reports, we did a session on that, for example, for our Zoom session. So yeah, thank you.
Emma.
Just a bit of a question. So we were looking at arranging a 24-hour retreat, but we were trying to think of interesting folk to come and speak. And I must admit, the past few years, the folk that kind of came to mind have already visited us. Is there anywhere where there's a suggestion for folk who might come to speak to us from estates? Because it's actually quite difficult unless you know somebody. That'd be really helpful to us to have maybe some suggested retreat speakers.
Yeah. Guy, do you want to answer that?
I think you'd be a better place for me for that one.
Okay. So on that, Emma, that's a really good point, actually. Dave, I don't know whether we've ever considered even something like a WhatsApp group for all estates focal leads, so that if you're an estates focal lead, you could just put into it, does anybody know a decent estate speaker? We're looking at this kind of a theme. You know, like Al Barrett would be really, really hot on, you know, how to speak God into the estates, or how to discern God on the estates. But other people would bring other perspectives on estates ministry. So I don't know, Dave, have we ever thought of a WhatsApp group?
So we've not done a WhatsApp group, and if people are willing and to pass me on their phone numbers, I'm very happy to set that up. We do have a Moodle group where there is some sort of information that's accessible through the kind of through that platform, but it's probably not been updated for a while. But what I can do is to put lists onto both. But yeah, as I say, if you're interested in joining a WhatsApp group, please do let me have your phone numbers.
Yeah, if you are, so can people email those through, Dave? I think that would be really helpful, actually, because it's quite instant access. It's just whether you can cope with the WhatsApp notifications going off, really. But that might be helpful for the sort of stuff that Emma's talking about. If anybody's got a suggestion for Emma, you know, please post it in the chat, or please let Dave know and he can pass it on. So thanks, Nick. Yes, please, to a WhatsApp group. That's great. So if there's no other questions for Guy, could you just speak to us again so I lose Dave?
Yeah,
there you are. Brilliant. So thank you so much. That was really rich, really helpful. I think exactly what people wanted to hear in terms of inspiration and some really practical kind of guidance. We have been asked if we could have your slides to circulate.
Yeah, shall I email them to Dave?
Could you let Dave have them, and he could be good enough to send them around for us? So that's great. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now.